Alright, guys, so over the last week, the US under Trump has done a lot of questionable things, and there are two big mistakes we need to talk about. They are going to cause a lot of chaos and a lot of economic crisis around the world. The first, of course, is Trump looking to take over the Gaza Strip, straight from Trump's mouth, and it's crazy here.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it to level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different.
And how does this bring peace to the Middle East? If it happens, we could have a never-ending instability plus a bigger oil crisis. Now, whether this occurs is still a coin flip, but what's coming is an immediate crisis that's going to flip the world of manufacturing. It's going to hurt US allies, it's going to help China, and more importantly, it won't help Trump reshore industry back to US soil. The staff, The Apprentice, has done the unthinkable. He has imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. This is going to be a global tariff that will clobber every single steel exporter on planet Earth. What's worse is how he might increase the tariff rate down the road. So 25% today, it could be 100% tomorrow, who knows? This is in addition to reciprocal tariffs that's on the menu as well. We have truly entered the twilight zone. Trump's about to get a rude awakening if he thinks he will save US manufacturing with this. Now this move, however, is a slap to the face of US allies that provide the US with steel imports. Trump has confirmed what we have been saying for a long time. He wants to reshore at any cost possible. A steel and aluminum tariff is very simple here. Steel buyers like construction firms will need to pay a 25% import tax to the US government, so they will suffer. This takes away the incentive from importers to bring in foreign steel, so demand is going to move back to domestic suppliers in the United States. Here are the economies that will get hit. Once again, it's Canada that will hurt the most. Trump wants to cut away over $11 billion in steel exports and nearly $10 billion in Canadian aluminum. Mexico's $6.5 billion will get hammered as well. Going down the list, we can see the whole world is going to be punished. BRICS countries like India and Brazil, they are targeted. G7 allies like Japan and Germany are getting slapped as well. There's no escape. But in the immediate term, biggest pain will be felt in Canada. Now, once again, this is an abject lesson every single country needs to understand. You can't possibly only have one single customer to run your export economy. It's risky, and that leaves you rather exposed to tariffs and trade wars. More than 70% of Canadian steel goes into the US economy, and in 2023, Canada exported over 6 million tons to the world. The exposure is extreme. The Canadian steel industry provides 23,000 direct positions and supports over 100,000 indirect jobs in the country. It's yet another reason why Canada has to look for other markets, and they have to do it fast. It's not a surprise that steel prices and steel producer stocks are dropping like a rock. Despite US industries declining, Trump's economy is still a rather big consumer. In 2022, the US imported $43 billion worth of iron and steel, even more than China in aggregate. US steel producers don't make nearly enough, so they have to buy a lot from the world. The US buys a lot of steel. In total, they brought in over 25 million tons. Tariffing imports at 25% is a big problem. Thanks to the energy crisis, many Western steel producers, we are talking about Germany, we are talking about Japan, they are facing a problem. It's enough to crush their margins and collapse their profits. Remember guys, steel is a razor-thin business. It's not like software or semiconductors. You sell your products in bulk. Profit margins can sometimes be in the single digits. Steel producers in these countries like Japan's Nippon Steel will hurt the most here. We have to remember the big agenda. Forget Biden's promise of friendshoring, right? It's not going to happen. It's all about reshoring production of everything to the US, including steel. In 2023, the US bought nearly $110 billion worth of aluminum and steel. So if you want to see the hit list of economic victims, here you go. Canada and Mexico, they could all see massive losses. China is an exception because they are the world's biggest consumer of steel, so they can easily absorb their own excess exports, but for the world, not so much. Now, what's tragic is how this will also affect smaller exporters as well. Out of nowhere, Australia is starting to freak out. Now, they only export around $1 billion worth of steel and aluminum. And Australia is pleading with Trump, please drop the tariffs. And when I say pleading, I really do mean pleading with the US to make a U turn.
We will navigate any differences which are there diplomatically, and we will continue to make the case to the United States for Australia to be given an exemption to any steel and aluminium tariffs. We have raised with the US administration in recent ministerial discussions these issues. We will continue to make the case for Australia's national interest with the US administration, and what's more, we regard this as also being in the US's national interest as well.
So the Prime Minister is going to politely ask Donald Trump to spare the rod, to drop the tariffs. Well, I guess I hope that works out for him. Now, you could say, why doesn't Australia or Japan shift production to other importers? Steel is a market with a global demand, so it should be easy to find other buyers, right? Now, the answer is both yes and no, guys. Yes, there will always be buyers for steel, but it's a question of price. And in commodities, it's always about price. This chart shows us major steel importers around the world. The biggest increase comes from Vietnam and Taiwan. But these markets are near impossible to break into because of price. Taiwan and Vietnam, they are all manufacturing economies as well, not really the end consumer like the US. And that means the steel they bring in needs to be dirt cheap. Taiwan, for example, uses steel to make electronics and semiconductors. They need affordable steel imports to ensure their own exports of chips are competitive. It's near impossible for countries like Japan, Germany, and Australia to suddenly shift their shortfall to these Asian economies. It's not going to happen overnight. Which country do you think is going to benefit from Trump's trade war on steel the most? Let's have a guess. It's not the United States and definitely not their G7 allies. The big winner is China. And this is where supply chains and low energy costs wins the day. Chinese suppliers can outproduce any other supplier in the world. Now, China accounts for 1 billion tons of steel production in 2023. That's more than 50% of global steel output in the world. There's a reason why the US tariffed Chinese steel back in 2018. Trump did it back then because it was just so cheap. US industries couldn't compete, and unsurprisingly, China is also the world's biggest consumer of steel. That's why they won't really be affected by Trump's tariffs. Beijing is moving the country towards greater domestic consumption as well. This means steel consumption in China will rise and they will simply buy their own production. Now, Trump's tariff seems like the end of the world for G7 producers. It's a big hit to high-cost producers, but for China, it's another Tuesday afternoon. Tariffs to them are nothing new anyway. But let's talk about the effects on the US economy now. Will Trump's tariff on US steel imports really revive the US economy? Are we headed back to the promised land? Will punishing his G7 allies really help Trump revive America's steel production and manufacturing? Now, when Trump first imposed his steel and aluminum tariffs back in 2018, it did initially increase production. Now, of course, local smelters will fire up to make up for the shortfall. In 2018, immediately after the tariffs, US steel production capacity did go up. It went from 75% to over 80%. The pandemic was an anomaly, and we continue to see domestic steel production go back up to over 85% in 2021. Now, this sounds great, right? 2 thumbs up to Trump's trade war because it does look like he won. But not really. Production did go up, but so did prices, which isn't good for an economy that's struggling hard. It's going to work against Trump's plan to reshore manufacturing. While prices did drop initially, eventually they all shot to the moon. Part of it was the pandemic, but another problem is US steel producers jacking prices up thanks to the whole host of factors. You have higher salaries in the US, you have higher energy costs, and of course, the protection of tariffs. This is a protected market against cheap Chinese steel. So US producers, they can charge an arm and a leg. And this brings us to the current conversation. So you tell me guys, now that global steel exports are getting punished, will this help bring down steel prices in the US or jack it up? It doesn't sound like good news for manufacturers in the US. Studies have shown, without a doubt, that the 2018 tariffs were only good for US steel companies and their profits. For the greater economy, it isn't good. It pisses off US allies because it deindustrializes them. Meanwhile, it also drives the prices of manufactured goods in the US higher. Prices just went to the moon. So let me summarize for you the damage. This move will piss off Germany, it will piss off Japan and Canada, it will annoy Mexico, it will look cute to the Chinese, all while driving up the cost of living in the US. This is truly Twilight Zone economics. Tariffs and protectionism only makes your economy less competitive long term. Now, when Trump first planned to tariff Canada and Mexico, car prices were facing a $3,000 increase. Automakers were worried that their production from up north or down south would get punished. Well, they don't have to worry about this anymore. All their domestic production will be using American-made steel and aluminum. But in exchange for this level of exceptionalism, the price tag to US consumers would be exceptional as well. So if you're a US consumer, I'm sorry, but you just got played. Behind door A is higher prices. Behind door B is also higher prices. Everyone gets higher prices. This is going to put tremendous pressure on US household budgets. It's not like consumers are raking it in and getting incredible salary increases. And here are some statistics that are simply shocking you must know about. US credit card defaults have jumped to the highest level since 2010. Defaults are now up by 50% year over year. Consumer situation isn't exactly strong in the US, it is in crisis mode. Meanwhile, the bottom third of Americans have zero savings as well. Do you think raising the prices of manufactured goods is good or bad? How does high inflation help people in this period? And that's why Trump's trade war is really puzzling, it's really bizarre. He's defying the laws of economics and gravity. No matter how I look at this is just one big boomerang effect on the US. And unless Trump can suddenly invent nuclear fusion and import robots from the future, his tariffs won't work. He will just jack steel prices higher. But let me know what you think. Will Trump's steel tariffs work? And how will his G7 allies take this sudden move? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.